I think everybody's taken their seats. Well, almost everybody anyway. I'd like to get started. On my talk, I'm contributing to dotNed Core. As Karel said, dotNed Core is completely open source, which means we can contribute to that. And we can, do pull requests and all that kind of stuff. And I did a couple of myself, and I wanted to just talk about my experience doing that and share that with you. So hopefully, some of you are inspired to start contributing to dotNed Core yourselves as well. First off, who am I? I'm Jonathan. Won't bore you with the details of my last name. It's too complicated. I'm an architect at InfoSupport. I've been working there for more than 10 years. During that time, I've done a lot of dotNed development for 10 or more years. And recently I've been having a focus on dotNed Core, which means I do a lot of blogs and I do videos. Maybe some of you may have seen my dotNetflix videos. If you haven't, check that out. My blog's over there, my Twitter, anyway. So that's me. I wanted to start off with a video of a hackathon we did right here at Startup Village in a container just up there. I can just not see it right from here. Where we did that with a couple of colleagues from InfoSupport, and we contributed to dotNed Core, and I just wanted to show you what that looks like.
Wij zijn met een aantal InfoSupport collega's bezig om aan het dotNed Core framework te werken. Dat is tegenwoordig helemaal open source. Je werkt eigenlijk met de hele wereld aan één stuk software.
We hebben een hackathon waarbij we de dotNed Core library gaan uitbreiden, gaan fixen eigenlijk. Omdat ik het leuk vind om het bij te dragen aan de community.
Los van het feit dat we het leuk vinden om gewoon met samen te coden aan software, vinden we het natuurlijk ook leuk als uiteindelijk je naam hangt aan een issue wat jij hebt gefixt in de dotNed Core framework. Want ja, dat draait straks op miljoenen computers, dus ja, dat is gewoon super gaaf om te doen.
Het is software die over de hele wereld gebruikt zal worden door heel veel mensen, heel veel bedrijven, heel veel softwareapplicaties. En het moet dus wel goed zijn en van hoge kwaliteit.
Leuke mensen waarmee we hiermee zitten. Leuke sfeer ook hier in het Innovation Lab bij InfoSupport.
Het lijkt me leuk om met collega's wat ervaring te doen met open source.
De mensen die hier vandaag zijn, die vinden het gewoon leuk om met een aantal collega's te werken aan software, maakt eigenlijk niet uit wat. En in dit geval is het ook wel gewoon leuk om aan een open source project te werken. We zitten midden op het Amsterdam Science Park, dus de omgeving is inspirerend.
Het stimuleert wel om hier mee aan de slag te gaan. Ja, het is leuk.
De mensen die hier nu zijn, want dat verschilt namelijk van mensen die al veel ervaring hebben met open source tot mensen die er nog nooit wat mee gedaan hebben. Dus het is ook een stukje overdracht onder elkaar, om elkaar te helpen. Hoe werkt dat nou? Hoe kan ik nou zo'n pull request uiteindelijk indienen en wat moet ik daarvoor doen? Dus dan ben ik blij als mensen zeg maar, het idee hebben dat ze wat geleerd hebben. Daarnaast ben ik natuurlijk blij als we een aantal pull requests die we daadwerkelijk zeg maar, oppakken, dat we die uiteindelijk ook echt gemerged krijgen in de main source code.
En daar werken we dan samen of individueel aan en we vragen elkaar vooral om hulp.
Het is eigenlijk een eerste soort pilot om te kijken hoe dit loopt. We hebben ook wat contacten bij Microsoft zelf, die het ook een heel leuk initiatief vonden. Dus het plan is wel om in de toekomst vaker van dit soort sessies te gaan houden en ook actiever te gaan bijdragen vanuit InfoSupport aan de open source community.
Ja, wel tof dat het gewoon kan en mede mogelijk gemaakt wordt en dat we straks iets zei dat kost in InfoSupport. Nee, dat is hartstikke leuk. Ja.
So as you can see, we did this hackathon right here, and before we wanted to organize that, we wanted to get a feel for what it looks like to actually do a pull request into the dotNed repository. So I did that on my own a couple of weeks before we did this, and I want to go through that process and talk you through it and to see what you encounter when you're doing it. So first off, how do you even get started doing this, right? So I was like, okay, I want to contribute to .NET Core, but how do I do it? Well, it may go without saying, read the fucking manual. There is quite a bit of documentation on this subject. There's a link right there. Up on the GitHub repo, it's actually open for everyone to edit right now. Is that still true, Carol? Yeah. So if you're missing something, if you want to add more clarification to what's on there right now, you can help the team out and do that.
By show of hands, how many people have done some contributing to .NET Core or CoreFX? Okay.
Yeah, there's thanks. All right, cool. So hopefully you've read this. If you haven't, you probably should. It's a bit tiny. You can see. This is actually it's a work in progress. It's there was a fair amount of documentation already, but it's being extended, it's being done out in the open. So if you need anything, just add it here, ask questions, get involved. But this is really your starting point to get started contributing to .NET Core. All right, so once you've read through that and you have an idea of what you need to do to get started, you want to find something you can work on, right? You want to have an issue or something or a feature you can work on. And there's a big list up on the GitHub repo of things you can, take a look at. But it's not easy. I had a look when I took the screenshot. There were about 1,634 open issues up on GitHub. That's a lot to go through. So you want to do some filtering and find an issue that's appropriate, especially if it's your first time. You don't want to, start on something big, right? So you want to narrow that down a bit. So, there's a couple of labels and milestones you want to look at. When we did this, the 0 bug bounce, it's called, I think, for .NET Core 2.0, preview 1 was up. So they were trying to drive back the number of bugs they had left for .NET Core 2.0, or at least preview 1 at that time. So I looked at that milestone and looked, okay, what are the issues that are still open for that milestone? What do they want to get fixed before that ships, right? So I looked at that. There's also a label that's called Up for Grabs, which is a good starting point to get started. It's usually the more easier issues to fix, the more easy ones to get started on, although there might be some big things up there as well. So before you get started, you read through the issue and make sure you understand what's necessary. There's also a couple of other labels, and I'll talk about those in a minute. What I said, make sure you understand what the issue is or what the feature is you want to work on. If you have any questions about it, just don't hesitate and put a comment in there, and somebody from the team will probably, usually respond, and pretty quickly as well. I was quite surprised with that. So don't hesitate to ask that. Once you've done your first pull request, Carl will make you a collaborator on the GitHub repo, which means he can assign issues to you as well. So you can get issues assigned so the other people know that you're working on it. The first time, doing it the first time, it's a bit tricky because you want to work on something, but you can ask in the issue comment if it can be assigned to you, and Carl will probably do that for you. If you want to work on a new feature, like you want to extend what .NET Core can do today, you can do that, but if you want to extend the API, there's an API review process in place, which is done by the .NET team. And that's behind closed doors, and that's by design right now, because you can get a lot of discussion on APIs and how they should look. And it's a fairly lengthy process, so it takes some time. If you want to add new APIs, be prepared to not get started on working on that issue right away, but you will have to wait to the API review process. And as I shown here, these labels indicate that. So if the API is approved, it's all done. It's settled, like, okay, this is going to be the API, this is what you're going to implement. But if the API needs work or it's ready for review, it's probably going to take some time before you can actually get started working on it, because the API needs, modifications or tweaks or anything. Be wary of those issues. So once you've found something you can work on, and I've got to show the list, but if you go here, I've done the up for grabs list. There's quite a list here. There's a whole bunch of issues you can look at. Some of them are like, here's one that needs work, the API needs work, so you need to make sure that that's done first. But here's a up for grabs issue that you can probably easily fix, depending on the area, right? So there's an area label as well, which indicates which part of the framework it's in. So there's like system.drawing. If you're familiar with that, if you use it a lot, it's probably easier to get started. But I personally haven't used system.drawing at all, I think. So I probably won't work on this. So be sure to check the area, see if you know that's part of the framework. If you know it well, it's probably easier to get started. If you haven't seen it ever before, it might be a bit of a hassle to get started.
And don't everybody jump into system.threading right away.
No.
Leave it more for other people, you know?
There is some scary code in there. So, all right. So when you found something to work on, you want to, clone the repository and start building the repo so you can actually start working on it. So what does that look like? First of all is you want to install some prerequisites on your machine. There's a couple of things you need depending on which platform you want to develop on. I put the links here. I won't go through them right now, but you can check them later. But there's things like you need CMake on those 3 platforms. There's not a lot of stuff. I think it's pretty basic. But yeah, you'll need to install some prerequisites before you can even start building the repository. Then you want to fork the CoreFX repo, fork it into your own account on GitHub. If you're familiar with open source, that's probably the first thing you'll do if you've never done it before. It might be a bit scary. What it's really doing is it's just creating a copy of the repository into your own account, so you have your own personal space where you can do stuff. You can actually go and change code in the CoreFX repo because that's owned by Microsoft, right? So unless you're on Microsoft's team, I don't think they're gonna allow contributions at that level right away. Once you've done that, you can clone that repository, so your own personal copy of it, to your machine with this command. If you're familiar with Git, it's probably familiar to you. If you've never used it, it's just the way you get the source code for CoreFX onto your machine, right? Then you want to build the repository. And basically that boils down to running a command shell or a bash script to run it, to build it, which is build.cmd on Windows and build.sh on Mac and Linux. And once you've done that, you also want to run the tests. So you go and do build tests, which actually compiles the tests for you and then runs them as well. So this build step only really does the compilation of the source code, like the implementation libraries, not the actual tests that are there. So that's basically what you need to do after that.
How long does it take to build?
I think that depends on what kind of machine you have, right? But I think on my machine it took about 30 minutes tops, so that's not too bad. If you, depending on what you're used to, right? So it takes some time, yeah, definitely. So you don't want to go and do that all over again, and I'll go through that. Once you get started, you need to build it once before you can actually start working on something.
I just started putting the numbers, how long it takes in the documentation, so
right,
I don't remember it, sorry.
It takes some time, right? The first time it's a lot of code there, so you'll need to compile it once. Once you've compiled it, you can just compile the stuff you're working on, right? So you don't have to compile the full framework. But you need it to get started, right? In my experience though, there's usually a couple of tests that fail, at least on OS X. I'm working on a Mac, so there's a couple of tests that fail. And depending on where those tests are, if that's the area you want to work on, it's going to be a problem because you don't know if the change you made, if that broke the code, right? So I'm not sure, are you aware of that? Or?
Not too much.
All right, so we'll have to get in touch on that stuff then.
For a buck.
Yeah, I tried it, I think, last week, and I just pulled the latest bits in, and there were a couple of tests. Not too many, but yeah, some failed. So. So yeah, keep in mind that some tests might fail, then depending on what you're working on, it might be a problem or not. So yeah, with that out of the way, we can start and write some tests and and test our code, right? So see if it works. So what kind of editor do you use, right? You want to edit the source code, so what kind of editor are you going to use? Well, on Windows it's pretty easy, you use Visual Studio, right? I think most .NET developers on Windows are used to Visual Studio. I've got the old, I couldn't find the new logo somewhere online, so I used the old one. You can use Visual Studio Code as well. Unfortunately, there is no IntelliSense support there because the project files for .NET Core right now are still MS-Build 14, I think, which is not supported by the C# plugin for Visual Studio Code. So that's a bit of a problem, especially if you're on Linux or on Mac, because well, you don't get IntelliSense, right? According to the documentation, you could try Visual Studio for Mac if you're on a Mac. I've tried it; it doesn't work. It cannot open the project files right now. It wants it to target .NET Portable, and it's not working. So yeah, you're gonna have a hard time doing that. So what I do on a Mac is
It narrows it down.
yeah. Well, Visual Studio Code works, right? You can edit it, but it doesn't give you much help in terms of well, is my code actually compiling before I actually compile it, right? So
Only for the diehards.
yeah, exactly. That sounds right.
It's like actual programming.
Yeah. That's a question.
Where's Notepad? Yeah.
Sorry. Sorry? Writer? I haven't actually tried that. I think you have, Peter, haven't you?
No, I haven't.
No, all right. No. It should work, maybe. I haven't tried it, but I'll give it a try. So yeah, there's a couple of other editors around. So
If the VS Code doesn't work, file a bug on that. I would be interested to find out, if we can fix it. The thing is that our engineers don't use probably VS Code, so that's why, if something that stops working, nobody notices. So we need community as well to bring this feedback.
All right,
and infrastructure as well.
It does work. It's just a bit harder than Visual Studio, so.
Let's make it as
yeah,
good.
it should be as easy, right? So yeah, that's a problem. If you're on Windows, it's not a problem. Visual Studio works just fine. I think Edwin tried that as well, and it was working fine for far as I know. So that's just fine. But yeah, on the other platforms, well, there's no Visual Studio there, right? So what my workflow looked like when I did this is I opened the assembly folder into Visual Studio Code on my Mac. So like something like system.xml for example. And then I would open two terminal windows, which is, you have terminals in Visual Studio Code, that's all integrated, which is nice. And then in one terminal I would go into the source folder and run MS-Build, basically, which compiles the source code for this assembly, so system.xml. And then there's a test folder as well, which contains the test for that particular assembly. So you do MS-Build and you say build and test, and that just runs the test, right? So, and then you just code, build, test, repeat. That's basically what it boils down to. And you switch between the terminals. Unfortunately, you can name a terminal in Visual Studio Code right now, which would be nice for this, so you can have the source and test named, but apart from that, it works just fine. Some tips. If you want to get started, create a new branch for the feature or fix you want to go and do. You want to make sure that your fork, like your copy of the .NET Core repo, is clean, so that you can actually pull in changes from there quite easily without having to, undo changes and that kind of stuff. So as long as you keep your master branch clean on your own fork, it's easier to do. Like I have this, and I just say, okay, pull in the changes from the CoreFX repo, and I just build it again, and it just works. So that's easy. Also important to know is that the build and test command I showed here is like with this command, it only builds the test code and not the actual implementation. So the first time I did this, I was like, okay, I changed the code, I ran the test, and it still fails. It's still failing. So I changed the code again, and it was running the test and it was still failing. I was like, why? Then I figured out that I had to, after changing the source code, I have to build the source code first and then run the test, right? So it actually started talking to the new code I was changing. So that's something to keep in mind. And if your test code hasn't actually changed and you do run build and test, it does nothing. It has an optimization there that it doesn't recompile the stuff, which is good, but sometimes you change the implementation. You want to actually rebuild your tests and run them against the new implementation. So that's something to keep in mind. So if you've changed the code and you run the test, and it says, it's all good, there's nothing here, but it hasn't actually run tests, so you don't know if you've changed anything. So once you've finished your feature or finished your fix, you want to submit a pull request to the core factory file so they can review it and then integrate your changes into their repository. So what does that look like? Well, basically it's very simple. You just go to GitHub and you click the magic button. If you've recently pushed changes, there's even a link up here which says, you've pushed a new branch, you want me to create a pull request for you? And you say, yeah, sure, and then it just creates the pull request, right? And you want to read the documentation on what should be in the description of the pull request. They have some guidelines on how you should write that stuff up, which is the same for commits as well. Like, okay, you should have one line explaining what you've changed, and then more lines which explain in more detail what you've changed, right? So there's some guidelines on that. You can check the documentation for that if you want. So once you've done that, there's a pull request, and then prepare to be amazed. First time I did this, I was really amazed by what started to happen. First off, there's about 18 different builds that trigger on different platforms. Like there's a build on Windows, there's a build on Mac OS, there's a build on Linux running. There's builds on various distributions of Linux as well. There are builds for 32-bit Windows, for 64-bit Windows. So I think in total it was about 18 different ones, and they all run in parallel. Like I've done professional software development for quite a while, and usually I have one build that triggers when I submit a pull request instead of 18. So yeah, I was really amazed by that. Also, expect to receive quite a few comments on your code. Some might seem a bit picky, like, are you serious? Do you really want me to change this? Like, there's a new line here. You don't want that new line? Fine, I'll remove it. It's not a lot of work to fix, but some might seem picky. But these guys have been working on this code base for a long time, so they know their stuff. So if they want it changed, there's probably a good reason they want it. So one of the things I ran into is like, okay, I did exactly what the issue described, which says, we should throw an argument null exception instead of an argument exception. I'm like, okay, sure. So I changed that. And then they said, we shouldn't throw an argument null exception because that's not what a dotNed framework on Windows does, right? So that throws argument exception or I think it was invalid operation exception. I don't know. So they actually looked at what the original code did and tried to compare that. And even the order in which exceptions were being thrown from the code, they looked at that as well. Like, okay, in dotNed framework, we first check this and throw an argument null exception, and then we do check this, and if that's not okay, we throw an argument exception. So I had to exactly put it in that order, so it's highly compatible with what dotNed framework currently does. So be prepared to get comments on that, and you have to change your code around a bit. But still, I was quite surprised that it's, in total, if you look at how deeply they go through the changes you've made, I was quite surprised to see the speed at which it did it. There's quite a few people getting involved and reviewing your pull request, and it was overall was speedy process. I think I wrote the code for my issue on Tuesday evening. I submitted the pull request on Tuesday night, probably something around then. And it was when I woke up the next morning, it was already reviewed, and they had some comments. So during the day, I changed the code around to, fix the comments, and then I think by the end of the next day, it was already merged and it was already done.
So that you didn't even sleep.
You know, time zones, yeah. So yeah, but so basically in the span of one day, one business day for me and one business day for them, it was already done. So, so yeah, I was pretty amazed by the speed at which they did it. So also, like I said, the comments might be picky, but they're written in such a way that you're encouraged to fix them rather than they're just being picky. I was really surprised by that as well. Like they're being criticism. They have criticism on your code, but they're explaining why they wanted to change that, and not just like this is wrong. They're saying why it's wrong, and you know you can fix it. So if we've we've made a couple of changes and we did a couple of pull requests, and like when we did the hackathon, I think we ended up with about 11 pull requests, and I think all of them have been merged by now. I mean, the hackathon was back in May, and most of them were already, I think, accepted the following day. Some of them they postponed because they were in the, they wanted to ship 2.0, and so they said, okay, we're gonna accept these changes, we're gonna accept them after we ship 2.0. So. Most of them have been accepted. But the problem is, how do I stay up to date, right? So we've done a couple of changes, but CoreFX moves pretty fast, very fast actually. So how do we stay up to date? So the first thing is, how do we update the code? Like, okay, I've got my own, my own copy. How do I make sure my own copy is up to date with what's happening in the CoreFX repo? So basically what you do is you just add an upstream a remote to your Git repository, which points to the CoreFX repo. You fetch in those changes and you pull them into your own master branch. If you've kept that clean, like you haven't touched anything on the master branch, that should just work. You don't have to, resolve merge conflicts and stuff like that. You just pull in the newest changes. And then once you did that, you need to clean your working folder, basically. So you run a clean -all, which just removes everything. You want to do this because sometimes tooling changes, other stuff changes. So you want to make sure that you're working on a clean slate, basically. So you just clean everything again, and then you build it again, and then you run the test again, right? And once you've done that, if you've done that, then you might want to push your changes up to your own master branch on your own fork. So you don't get a broken master into your own fork, right? So that helps keeping things clean. So that's on updating the code. What's happening in the repository? Like all other kinds of changes are going in, all kinds of stuff. So how do we keep up to date with that? Well, first off, once you've submitted your first pull request, you're going to be you'll become a collaborator. Carol will send you an invitation and you can accept it, or you can, but usually once you accept that. And that signs you up for notifications on everything that happens in the repository. Like everything. I had this on the first night, and I think the next morning I looked at my mailbox and I was like, what the hell just happened? There were, I don't know, probably about 30, 40 threads going on. Like I have a threaded mailbox, so that helps a bit, but still, there were quite a few unread mails in my mailbox. I think Carol actually described it as a distributed denial of service attack on your mailbox. So what you do is you quickly disable that, right? So you just, disable it. But now, I don't know what's happening in the repository, right? So what are people doing? What are issues coming in? How do I keep up to date with that? And it's actually a pretty hard one to solve because GitHub currently doesn't have a way to, filter what you get subscribed to. You can subscribe to everything or nothing, but there's no middle ground. And I know that Carol is working on a solution for that, which is also open source. It's an open source tool, I think. So if you're interested in that, you can contribute to that as well. And I think it's really needed. I think actually GitHub should do this themselves, but I don't know. Yeah, it's kind of tricky to stay up to date on what's happening in the repository. One thing that is happening in that space that we did what's it called? Like a stand-up kind of thing. Can we talk about that?
Sure.
Yeah.
It's public information.
So we did a stand-up with a couple of guys who contributed to dotNed Core. So that's pretty cool. And we talked with each other on Skype, I think it was, and talked about what's happening in Corefax and how we can improve stuff and stuff like that. So I think that's going to help with staying up to date. Still, you'll want to, I don't know, filter what comes into your mailbox somehow. It was on YouTube. I think it's gone now.
We were not ready.
No, they were not ready. Hopefully, it will be online soon, and that's going to be held. I don't know, a couple of times a year, probably. I don't know, but yeah, that's something we're working on right now. All right, so that was my talk. Any questions on anything I've talked about?
How many reviewers do you need for its completed pull request?
Well, it depends on the number of comments you get, basically. I think the first pull request I did, I had it reviewed twice. So they put in comments, I fixed those, and I submitted again, and they reviewed it again, and after that was fixed. I think some of the others were a bit more complicated, but it really depends. There isn't really a hard number on how many reviews you get. It just depends on how much things you need to change again, I guess.
Our rule is we have to have at least one Microsoft employee who's not author of the design. So that's our rule.
Yeah.
But sometimes you can get 5-6 people chiming in if they're interested. So.
Yeah. Yes?
How do you prioritize the features you are working on? That's the first one, and you have to get in line with the plans of the product team in terms of what you are implementing.
Yeah, so how do you stay in sync with what they're doing?
Exactly.
Yeah. That's something we're working on as well. I think the milestones really help there. Like you can see what are the next versions coming up. There's a description there as well, like what is the key things that are going into that release. There's no hard date on when that's going to get released, but at least you have some idea of what they're working on. And that's going to be shared in that stand-up as well, like product plans and how you can sync with that. So yeah, that's definitely something we're working on right now. Yes?
When you start working on it, I think you probably assign it to a name, right?
Well, you can't do that when you're not a collaborator. I think even when you're a collaborator, you can. So Carol or somebody else from the team actually has to assign it to you.
Okay.
But you can ask for that in an issue, like, okay, can you assign this to me? And somebody from the team will do it.
And then how much time do you have to actually solve the problem?
Good question. I don't think there's a fixed time limit. It's just like, okay, if you want this to be in that release, you'll want to do it before it ships, right? So,
Who decides that some feature will be in some release or not? Who decides that? You or product team or both?
the product team.
So
Yeah, well,
you suggest.
Yeah, we can suggest a change, and like we can submit a pull request, but it's still up to them if they accept it before a certain release, right? So that's basically how that works.
But can you be stopping a bug getting fixed because you're just sitting on an issue, or have they got people sort of working in parallel?
Like, can you stop a fix from going into a release?
Yeah, I don't mean deliberately. But
No,
does
yeah,
that
yeah.
happen, you know?
I think if they're about to ship a release, they'll probably ping you, like, are you still working on this, or are you, is this still being worked on at all, or something like that? So they'll get in touch with you and ask you what you're doing, and I guess if they think it's important enough, they might assign it to somebody else and they can go do it, but yeah, that really depends on how the team works with that.
It's very exceptional. I think we used it twice.
Yeah, I don't think it happens.
Last
that
half a
often.
year.
Yeah.
So.
Yes?
What about coding guidelines? You have any static analysis or so?
I think there's static analysis in there. I'm not sure if that runs in the build as well. I don't know. I think most of that is done through reviews as well, because they're really picky about some things, which is good.
Static analysis that would say
Yeah, I don't think there's much static analysis going on right now, but that might change.
There's a description of the guidelines.
Yeah, there are some guidelines on how you should write code, and basically what it boils down to is like you should match the coding style that's used in .NET Framework, or match the coding guidelines that are already there, right? So you might try to match those, and if they're not happy, they'll put a comment in, and you can go fix it. So, yeah.
If you fork the code and you want to fix something, is it possible that there are multiple people working on the same fix
So
that you don't know about?
that's why we assign things to people,
Okay.
because that's the sign like, oh, somebody's working on that. Before I should jump on it, I should ping that person like, hey, can I take it? And we had one guy sitting on something for more than a month. Someone else showed up, and he already said like, yeah, so I don't have right now time to finish it. If someone wants to pick it up, go ahead. And someone did that. So
first for permission to
yeah. Either in the comments or in assignments, you will notice.
Okay.
I don't think I've seen in last half a year I've seen 1 or 2 cases when 2 people work on the same thing, and that's always like, dude, that's why you should tell us on the issue that you're working on it so that others know. Yeah.
It also depends, I guess, on how long it will take you to fix it. Like the first fix I didn't get that issue assigned to me, but it was fixed in a day. So I worked on it for a day, or I only about 2 hours or something, and then I submitted it. So yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
You make one fork for your version, and then afterwards you do all your contributions from that fork, or is the fork per change?
No, I fork for myself. So I have a clone of the CoreFX repo on my own personal account. And then I just create branches and stuff like that. Yeah. Yes?
Yeah, another question with a remark you mentioned about flooding your mailbox.
Yeah.
So you can try out Octobox, I know.
Yeah.
Dashboard on top of GitHub.
So yeah, it's gonna be my talk.
He's gonna talk about that.
Half of his slides are in my talk as well from the other side. So yeah.
Anything else? No? Right. I have a couple of resources. If you want to look at it, I'll make sure the slides are somewhere you can access them. They're up on slides.com anyway. So I have the link to the documentation and the prerequisites as well. I also have a blog that I wrote after I submitted my first pull request. So kind of the same talk I'm giving here, but in a blog form, so you can go and read that. One thing I noticed just before we started this talk is there's a dotNed Summer Hackfest going on. That's something that's being organized out of the dotNed Foundation by John Galloway. I put the link here if you're interested. It's not necessarily tied to .NET Core or anything. You can do pull requests to any of the .NET projects that are on the .NET Foundation umbrella, basically. So yeah, if you're interested in contributing and you want to get started, this might be a good time to do so. All right, and with that, thank you very much.